And this is Module 13 for EDL 851. And this is the case study for A Good Teacher Turns Bad. All right, so the article is about Crestview Elementary School, and this is an about above average school in a rural area. Miss Wilson is the principal at Crestview Elementary School, and she has been principal for about 3 years now. And Miss Horton is a veteran teacher. She's a first grade teacher who has done excellent things within the school and has also been Teacher of the Year. However, she began having some personal concerns that are causing some personal issues that are causing some concerns at school. So parents have been calling and complaining about Miss Horton and the verbal abuse that has been going on within the classroom. They have contacted Miss Wilson, the superintendent, and the Board of Education. So category 1, problem identification and analysis. So what I know is that Miss Horton is a good teacher. Like I said before, she was Teacher of the Year. The second thing I know is that Miss Horton has had a change in behavior in her home life and in her professional life. Her husband has left her, raising their 2 teenage boys on her own. So this has caused some change in her behavior. The third thing I know is that parents have called and made some complaints on Miss Horton about some of the things that have occurred within the classroom. And then the last thing that I know is that Miss Horton does lack some professionalism. So during their conference with Mr. Stanford, that she was unprepared, and then there was some yelling that occurred and some berating of the parent during this conference. So some of the things that I need to know is I need to know about her past and her current observations. Has this inappropriate behavior around her students occurred during these past observations? So that's something that I need to know, and I need to be able to look at over the years that she's been there. Another thing that I need to know are the current policies that are in place within the school and within the district for failing teachers. And then the last thing is just the process for removing a failing teacher if that needed to happen. The problems at hand are the complaints that the principal and the superintendent and the Board of Education has gotten on Ms. Horton and the things that are occurring within the classroom. Another problem at hand is just the lack of communication that Ms. Horton has had with the parents. So they have contacted her about some of these things. However, she is not contacting them back. So there is no parent-teacher conference that is being had. The third problem at hand is the aggressive behavior that was displayed during her parent-teacher conference. So if this is being seen during a parent-teacher conference, is this aggressive and verbal behavior being conducted within the classroom? And then the last problem at hand is that the parents want the kids removed from her class. All right, category 2 is the plan of action. So I think first thing that I would want to do is to meet with Ms. Horton. I think it's important to sit down with her one-on-one and ask some open-ended questions and just try to make this as non-confrontational as possible. I know that she's had some times where meeting and discussing things has been confrontational, so I would want to make sure that it's not as confrontational if needed, like if we could help it. The second plan of action is just to be able to plan some evaluations and some walkthroughs so that I can see what's going on in the classroom and why there may be lots of complaints that are occurring and why so many students are worried. The third thing is to put into place a professional development growth plan. I think it's important to make sure that we're doing everything possible for Miss Horton and the students, especially since the superintendent has been contacted. So to put these professional growth plans into action, we would need to make sure that we are using a research-based evaluation and that we are doing some pre and post meetings so that we can provide feedback to Ms. Horton. And then we also need to make sure that we're planning some professional development for Ms. Horton, whether it's personal or educational. The fourth thing is that I would want to make sure that I'm meeting with district administrators and staff members. I know that there have been some moments where there have been some confrontations with staff members, so I would want to get their side of the story, but also just to discuss things with district administrators, because if I do need to let Miss Horton go, I need to know what the process for that is. And then the last plan of action is to make sure that we meet with with Mr. Stafford, so that we apologize and we let him know that that is not acceptable behavior at Crestview Elementary School. I also think it's important for us to talk to Mr. Stafford about the plan of action for Julie. All right. Category 3. So how we can resolve some of these issues that are occurring is, the first one is I think we need to move Julie to another classroom. It's important to make sure that Julie is safe and learning in another first grade classroom. The second way to resolve the issue is to just make sure we are conducting more walkthroughs and evaluations. I want to be able to see if I notice these verbal comments to students during these walkthroughs and evaluations. I also want to make sure that I am visible within the classroom. The third way that we could solve these issues is to place some kind of support staff in the classroom with Miss Horton, so that not only is Miss Horton in the classroom, but there are 2 sets of eyes and hands throughout the day. And then the last thing would be to place Miss Horton on leave if necessary. All right, category 4 is just debriefing about the problem. So what are my thinkings, my feelings, and what am I valuing? So the first thing I'm thinking about is we all carry around baggage. We all have those moments where we have hit a bump in the road. However, parents do trust us with their kids. They send us their children every day, so we want to make sure that we don't fail them and that we're making their school day a success. Something else that I was thinking about is just the concern that the students are having about not wanting to come to school. So I think it's also, again, important that we're providing kids with a successful school day. So the feelings that I'm having are neutral feelings. I want to make sure that I am getting everyone's side of the story. All people are heard before a verdict is reached. So I want to make sure that I'm hearing Julie's side of the story. I want to make sure I'm hearing Mr. Stafford's side of the story, and that I'm hearing Ms. Horton's side of the story. I also am feeling that the students don't feel safe in the classroom. It's important that they do, because if they don't feel safe in a classroom, that's all that they're thinking about. They're not thinking about what they're learning about. They're thinking about being worried, being unsafe. And then the last thing that I'm feeling is just determined. Am I doing what's right for everyone involved in this situation? And then the things that I'm valuing are the students' well-beings. I'm also valuing teacher input. I think it's important to know what Ms. Horton's thinking, how she's feeling. I'm valuing parent concern. And then the last thing is just the feedback, the purposeful feedback that's given to Ms. Horton with her walkthroughs, with her evaluations, and just the things that are occurring within the classroom. So some of the things that we can do to help with these is just to make sure that we are conducting evaluations and walkthroughs on Miss Horton. I want to make sure that everything is appropriate within the classroom. Another thing we can do is to repair the relationship with the parent and the teacher. I know that the conference didn't go well with Miss Horton and Mr. Stafford, so I would want to do a follow-up conference and just make sure that we apologize and let them know that that is not Crestview Elementary School behavior. And then the last thing that we can do to help with the situation is to determine, to determine what Miss Horton's status for the next year is going to be. We know that things were headed south at spring break last year, so things haven't gotten better. So what can we do, and what is her status for the following year? All right, Category 5 is reflecting on on Standard 2, which is the instructional capacity. So an educational leader promotes the academic success and personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity. So Component 1, promote the academic success of every student by moving the students to a conducive environment, making sure that they feel safe and are learning. Being able to provide purposeful feedback so that academic success can be had. I think that's important to make sure that we're giving Miss Horton that feedback. Also, continuing to monitor Miss Horton, given those walkthroughs and those evaluations. And then I think it's important for academic success to take place is to provide some aid in the classroom with Miss Horton. Component 2, promote the personal well-being of every student. The first thing, I think it's important to build those relationships with those students. Let them know that you are wanting what's best for them, that you are there for them, and that you do value their education. The second thing I think is important to promote that personal well-being is to make sure we listen to the concerns that students have. If we don't listen to those concerns, then we're not building those relationships. The third thing would be to provide an emotionally safe environment for those students. Once again, if they're sitting in class only thinking about the things that they're worried about that are occurring within the classroom, then they're not learning. And that's our number one priority. And then the last thing to promote that well-being is to make sure that we are visible. And I think that goes to everything that was mentioned before, building relationships, listening to those concerns, and then providing that safe environment. And then the last thing for enhancing the instructional capacity, I think it's important for teachers to self-reflect. Self-reflect on their day, self-reflect on their evaluations, and just self-reflect on themselves and their teaching. I also think it's important to reiterate those expectations that we have for the classroom and for the school. Enhancing instructional capacity can be done by conducting walkthroughs and evaluations and then providing some interventions to help with those things that might need to be refined. I think it's important to provide that purposeful feedback so that so that teachers can grow, so that students can grow. And then providing professional development for for teachers so that they can continue to grow. And I think providing that professional development to Miss Horton would be important so that she can get back to the teacher that she was before. Thank you very much.